Sorry, volume is good, thank you. We're going to start by hearing from a woman who lives in this community and has dealt with real challenges, but continues to fight for fairness for herself and her family. I want you to hear her story. She'll be speaking in Spanish. Our colleague will translate, and then the rest of us up here will have something to say. It's my honor to introduce to all of you Megalania Rincon.
Buenos días.
Whoops, there you go.
Buenos días. Mi nombre es Megalania Rincón. Nosotros llegamos de la República Dominicana a los Estados Unidos en el 2001.
Okay. Good morning. Is this on? There you go. Good morning. My name is Megalania Rincon, and I came from Santo Domingo in 2001.
Mi esposo limpiaba edificios y yo tengo una discapacidad y me dediqué a criar mi hija.
My husband was a maintenance worker in buildings, and due to a disability, I dedicated my life to raising our daughter.
Mi esposo murió en el 2005 y mi hija y yo nos quedamos con un cheque del SSI y una ayuda para mi hija que ya no recibimos, y eso me trajo problemas al pagar el alquiler.
My husband died in 2005, and that left myself and my daughter with just an SSI check and a form of assistance for the daughter that we no longer received, and that gave me lots of troubles to pay the rent.
El casero me llevó a la corte, pero todo se resolvió cuando me inscribí en el programa del DRI.
The landlord took me to housing court, and the problem was resolved when they put me on the DRI program.
No ha sido fácil para pagar la renta y las cuentas para vivir, pero gracias a Dios recibimos ayuda, incluyendo el SSI y el seguro social de mi esposo. Yo hice todo lo posible para criar a mi hija en una casa segura y limpia y decente, pero el apartamento ha tenido problemas desde que nos mudamos, y el casero no repara bien ni el apartamento ni el edificio.
It hasn't been easy to pay the rent and bills to maintain our way of life, but thank God that we have help from SSI and from Social Security from my deceased husband, and I do everything possible to make sure that I have a safe and decent home for myself and my daughter, but we've had troubles recently because the landlord doesn't make the repairs that we need in the building.
Primero, la seguridad. Nosotras vivimos en el primer piso y las ventanas no tienen seguro. ¿Cómo nosotros podemos acostarnos tranquila y sentirnos seguras sabiendo que cualquiera puede venir a abrir la ventana, entrar y hacernos un daño?
So the first thing is the security. We live on the first floor, and the windows don't shut properly. And this makes me feel very unsafe. How can I feel safe at night knowing that the windows don't close properly?
Yo no tengo ni siquiera una llave del edificio. Y tenemos que pasar, cuando mi niña y yo venimos de la calle, tenemos que pasar por el basement a entrar, coger el elevador y entrar al edificio. Y a veces, si tenemos suerte que viene saliendo una persona o entrando una que tiene sus llaves, entonces pasamos.
She's saying, I don't have keys to the building, and sometimes my daughter and I have to go in through the basement to get into the building when someone leaves the basement door open. And sometimes we get lucky and someone opens the front door for us and we're able to get into the building.
Esto nos hace sentir aún menos seguras, porque así como nosotros pasamos por el basement a nuestra casa, así puede entrar cualquier otra persona que no sea de los inquilinos del edificio.
This makes me feel even more unsafe because just the way that we can get in through the basement, anyone can get in through the basement of the building.
Además, nosotros vivimos justamente encima de la boila. Y el humo de la boila se sube, entra a la casa por las grietas de los zócalos y por las grietas del piso.
And in addition to that, we live directly, our apartment is directly on top of the boiler. And the smoke and the fumes from the boiler go directly into my apartment through the floors.
También tenemos problemas de plomería. Los drenajes no funcionan bien. El inodoro no descarga bien. Y yo me siento segura no me siento muy segura para tomar esa agua que sale de la pluma, ni para bañarme.
We also have drain pipe issues in the apartment. The toilet doesn't flush properly, and sometimes water comes from below the drain pipes into the sinks and the bathtub, and I don't feel safe drinking this water or showering in the apartment with this water.
Hay una fuga en la tubería y el agua cae todo el tiempo desde el techo y daña mi ropa del closet, daña todo.
I have a water leak also coming through the ceiling of my apartment, and the water gets into the closet and destroys my clothing.
El landlord me pintó el techo y arregló, porque después de que fueron los bomberos allá, porque yo llamé a la ciudad porque había un escape de gas. Entonces, iban todos los días los supervisores y por eso él arregló.
The landlord painted the ceiling of my apartment because the firefighters came to my apartment when I called the city due to a gas leak. And since then, he's been more vigilant because inspectors from the city have been coming routinely to the apartment.
Yo no soy una persona rica porque yo necesito ayuda para pagar la renta y mi niña y yo vivimos con 700 y algo de dólares, que es que yo recibo de ese SAI y del seguro social de mi esposo.
I'm not a rich person. My daughter and I, we depend on public assistance to pay the rent. We get about $700 a month to help us paying the bills.
Yo trato de hacer lo que yo pueda para vivir en un lugar saludable y limpio y seguro, pero no puedo yo sola.
And she's saying that I do whatever I can to make sure that I have a safe and healthy home to live in, and I definitely can't do it alone.
Por eso le agradezco aquí al alcalde Bill de Blasio por este anuncio, que hoy es un aviso para mi casero y para todos aquellos caseros que no arreglan los apartamentos y el edificio de sus inquilinos. Y gracias también a la defensora del pueblo aquí, que es nuestra defensora, le agradezco a ella también.
That's why I'm thankful to Mayor Bill de Blasio and Public Advocate, because this is an announcement for all of the landlords who aren't making the proper repairs and doing what they have to be doing in their buildings.
Nadie puede vivir en un edificio inseguro y sucio. Gracias, pero ahora gracias al alcalde Bill de Blasio, ya eso no vamos a vivir más así. ¿Ya?
No one deserves to live in an unsafe and not clean building, and that's why, thanks to Mayor Bill de Blasio, this is going to change.
Ahora tengo el placer de presentarle el alcalde el BID del Blasio.
Thank you so much, Miguelania, and thank you for standing up for your rights, tus derechos, and the rights of all the people who live in your building and in the community. So it really means a lot that you are speaking out.
Okay.
Let's give Miguelania a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I think what Miguelania said at the end there, no one in this city should have to live in an unsafe building or a dirty building. Every New Yorker matters. Every New Yorker has rights. And the mission of this administration is to make sure that people can live in dignity and have the kind of conditions that are right for them and their family. That's why this announcement today is so important. Listen to that whole list that Miguelania outlined. Imagine every day dealing with the feeling that your building's not safe, that your apartment might be flooded at any moment, that the water you drink may not be clean. This is not the right way for people to live. And there are landlords in this city who have willingly and knowingly put their tenants in harm's way. There are landlords in this city who know that they're not providing safe and decent living conditions, but they do it every single day in violation of the law. I want to tell you a few things about what we're doing about it. And then I want you to hear from my colleagues in government. I particularly want to say at the outset, I want to thank Tish James because she's taken the work we did with the worst landlords watch list back in the time I was public advocate, and she's really built upon it intensely. And I also want to say she has the best title of anyone in government when translated into Spanish, Defensora del Pueblo. So I envy you. Now, we're very clear, and we've been working with the public advocate and all the elected officials on this. We will not tolerate landlords who do not follow the law. We simply won't. And there's more and more being done to stop them from breaking the law and to create real consequences for any tenant who for any landlord who treats their tenants unfairly. We're here today to take aim at 8 landlords. And these 8 landlords together own a dozen buildings, and we're calling them the Dirty Dozen because these 12 buildings just are not right. They're not the kinds of places people can live in decently. 12 buildings in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Queens, including the building that Miguelania lives in very nearby. Together, 610 apartments, 1,800 New Yorkers who live in these 12 buildings. These 12 buildings alone have over 2,000 housing violations, just 12 buildings. And you've heard about some of the problems that Miguelania outlined, but if you look at the buildings as a whole, we're talking about rodent infestations, no hot water, no heat, no electricity, no gas, lead paint. We're talking about the whole range of problems that have not been addressed by landlords. And we're here today to put a stop to that. We will be doing some things that have never been done or have not been done in decades to address these problems. To begin with, we're assigning a dedicated tenant lawyer to each building, available day or night to help the tenants. So literally a lawyer that the tenants will get to know who will be there to serve that building every single day. And we're going to make clear to these bad landlords that the level of scrutiny that they will be under is going to be like nothing they've ever experienced before. As of yesterday, we put them on notice. They have 15 days to correct outstanding violations, 15 days to get right with the law. If they do not, we will hit them where it hurts them the most. We will hit them in their wallets. The city will stop paying rent to these landlords. We will cut off their revenue to show that we mean business and to show that we will not tolerate this law breaking. The landlords still don't get the message after that, we will go to housing court, and the city will take action against them in housing court. That can result in a building being put into receivership. In some instances, it can result in either civil or criminal charges against the landlord. So we're going to throw the book at these bad landlords. And I want every one of these unscrupulous landlords and any other landlord in the city who thinks that they can cheat the people of the city to know that we're coming after them. And I want the tenants of the city to know we have your back. And we're going to use the power of the city of New York to protect you. In the 12 buildings, in the dirty dozen, 6 of these buildings have already received emergency repairs from HPD, so we're not waiting. We want to make sure people are safe, so we're already intervening. And so far already, $100,000, almost $100,000 in fees and fines have been assessed against these landlords. So we've already shown that we're going to take action, but today we're letting them know we're going to go a lot farther. And this is going to be an approach we'll use more and more across the city. I want to thank all of the elected officials who are here. You'll hear from them in a moment because they've all been a part of our effort and extremely supportive of this crackdown on bad landlords. I want to thank my colleagues from the administration who are doing such crucial work. Our Commissioner of Social Services, Steve Banks, obviously leading the way in terms of the legal help we provide to tenants. Don Shacknai, the First Deputy Commissioner of HPD, and Anne-Marie Santiago, the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for Enforcement and Neighborhood Services. I want to thank them. HPD is doing an outstanding job enforcing the laws and making the emergency repairs better than ever before. And I want to thank the legal services providers who we turn to regularly. And they are real heroes. I'm going to call them all out, and then we should give them a big round of applause. Legal Services NYC, Bronx Legal Services, the Legal Aid Society, and the Urban Justice Center. Let's thank them all for what they do to protect tenants. These buildings in the dirty dozen are unacceptable, in an unacceptable state. And we know that we've seen this kind of thing too often in this city. So now we're going to do something that is a back-to-the-future kind of solution. In 1962, a law was passed called the Spiegel Law, and it allowed the city to withhold the rent of anyone that we were providing public assistance to, that we could withhold the rent to their landlords if conditions in the building were, quote, dangerous, hazardous, or detrimental to life and health. At the same time, the law makes clear that the landlords in retribution cannot evict those tenants, because what the city is doing is saying until the landlords get right with the law, we're not going to provide them money, and we're going to protect those tenants and their right to be there simultaneously. And that helps all the tenants of a building, I'd like to note, not just those who happen to be on public assistance, because it really calls the question on the landlord to fix violations that affect everyone. So hundreds of families who are not on public assistance will benefit as well. This law was used aggressively during Ed Koch's administration, and to very good effect, but then stopped being used. It's time to bring it back. It's time to take this tool that really works and apply it aggressively again, and that's what we've announced. And we've told these landlords yesterday that that's what they're about to experience. This connects perfectly with the other efforts we're taking to protect tenants. A tenfold increase in legal services, free legal services for tenants facing illegal eviction and harassment. We've seen real results in that. Evictions by city marshals have gone down 24% in the last 2 years, so we know that new initiative is working. Obviously, our overall affordable housing program already, almost 30,000 affordable apartments have been preserved in the last 2 years and 4 months. That's one of the most profound things we can do to make sure that tenants have affordable housing and safe housing. We're going to make sure this is a city for everyone. And we're going to make sure it is a fair city for everyone, that affordable housing is also quality housing. Just say a few words in Spanish. Hoy estamos obligando a 8 caseros a arreglar las condiciones deplorables en 12 edificios. Si estos caseros no se comunican con HPD en 15 días, vamos a retener el pago del alquiler de los inquilinos que reciben asistencia pública. Todos los neoyorquinos merecen vivir en un hogar seguro y decente. Y haremos todo lo posible para lograrlo. With that, I want to turn to the Defensora del Pueblo and thank her for her aggressive and intense advocacy on behalf of tenants and for making sure that bad landlords are always in the public eye and have a spotlight on them and know they can't get away with these violations. Our public advocate, Tish James.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Banks and all of my colleagues in government. The Office of Public Advocate is a barometer of critical issues affecting most New Yorkers. And the number one complaint to the Office of Public Advocate on any given day is the crisis in affordable housing and the substandard housing conditions which continue to exist all over the city of New York. Every New Yorker deserves to live in safety and security, and every apartment needs to meet basic standards of decency. But the unfortunate reality is that too many New Yorkers are living in buildings run by landlords who unfortunately fail to live up to the basic standard of habitability for far too many New Yorkers. And today, under the leadership of Mayor de Blasio, we are forcing some of the worst landlords to fix their buildings because these landlords have been put on notice, and it's time that they clean up their act. We are invoking a state law to protect nearly 2,000 tenants in 12 buildings owned by 7 landlords. And the city is warning landlords that it will withhold public assistance rent payments to some of the city's worst landlords until they repair the conditions in their buildings. Now, you might be wondering, will this allow landlords to basically evict tenants for non-payment? And the answer is no, because the law protects these tenants and basically says that these tenants cannot be evicted for non-payment. New York City is not a city that should be subsidizing landlords whose buildings have crumbling stairwells and leaking pipes and lead paint and vermin and rodents and who lack emergency exits. And it's been an honor and a privilege to work with the mayor and Commissioner Banks and Commissioner Bean and all of my colleagues here today to make this work on behalf of New Yorkers who for a very long time have not had a voice in government. And collectively, these buildings, all of which have been on the worst landlords list, have over 2,000 violations. And most of these violations go to basic health and the safety of the residents, and a significant number of the residents are children and senior citizens. And 5 of the buildings are owned by the #1 slum lord who happens to live in a beautiful mansion in Westchester, whose name is Ved Parkash. Ved Parkash. Money talks, and things happen when you turn off this spigot. And these landlords have been notified that they will stop receiving payments, and we know the truth, that things will happen. So let this serve as a loud and clear message to all of the unscrupulous landlords out there. We are not going to just list you and shame you on the worst landlords list. We will work with this administration to urge them to withhold your rent until you make critical improvements in your building. This is just one more step in our fight to ensure that every New Yorker has a safe and decent home. I would be remiss if I did not mention the outstanding lawyer who is now the chief attorney in the Office of Public Advocate, who was formerly the head of the Bronx Legal Services as well as Brooklyn, Jennifer Levy, and her wonderful team in the Office of Public Advocate. Yes. And for anyone out there who wants to volunteer in the Office of Public Advocate, who is interested in public service work, who wants to continue to do the work of the angels, please contact the Office of Public Advocate. We can certainly use your assistance. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I want you now to hear from our colleagues from the City Council. They all have long histories of fighting for the rights of tenants, and they all have long histories of dealing with the problems of bad landlords and unsafe conditions in buildings in their communities. First, our host for today, Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez.
Well, I know that residents of Northern Manhattan, for us, like having you here is like the dream come true. You know, as someone has said before, even though we also have to give credit for certain things that the previous administration was able to do, but in my first term, I only recall having the previous mayor one time at Isabella Nursing Home for a meeting. Here, I lost count of how many times we've been in our district, delivering only for residents of Northern Manhattan when it comes to the UPK, when it comes to the police community initiative, when it comes to tenants protection at Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation. We can say that you've been here in the last 2 years or more, close to 10 times, delivering good news, and this is important. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Northern Manhattan. Thanks, Mayor de Blasio, the leader of our city who put the money where the middle class and the working class needed the most, on housing, education, jobs, and public safety. Thanks, Public Advocate James, Commissioner Banks, my colleagues here, Luis and Mark, and all of you for being here for this important step on behalf of tenants across the city. Today we are taking action on issues very familiar to myself, who in previous apartment where I have lived, 124 Sherman Avenue, 40 Taylor Street, 18 Jacobus Place. Many times I made the 311 phone calls because the landlord was not doing the repair. And unfortunately, no one heard my voice and problem that I have with my family in those apartments. But we are taking action on issues that is very familiar also to residents of my district, working class and middle class across the whole city. The failure of landlords to fix violations in apartments uptown is not just a minor negligence. It is purposeful. It is used as a means to get residents to move out and push the apartments out of stabilization. This is damaging to a vital stock of affordable housing, but it is even more damaging to our communities of working class and middle class, New Yorkers who rely on affordable places to live. I want to thank the administration for taking action today and thank our public advocate for continuing the strong work of calling out the slumlords of our city. These are people who damaged the fabric of New York City, and we must hold them accountable. This is just the latest step on behalf of tenants uptown, where we have some of the most precious stock or rent stabilized units in the city. Community Board 12, the one that I represent, has the largest number of regulated apartments in the whole city and the second in the state after Buffalo. From free legal services to tenant support, we are doing our part to keep tenants in their homes, living comfortable without fear of deplorable conditions. We will continue our efforts to see this community preserved, and I thank again Mayor de Blasio and your whole administration for being here, delivering good news to New Yorkers in our communities and throughout the 5 boroughs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. You want to do a little Espanol?
Para mí, como alguien que he vivido en 3 apartamentos, 40 de Taylor, 18 de Jacobus Place, 124 de Sherman, donde muchas veces hicimos llamadas personalmente para mí, mi familia, y nunca hubo una voz que puso a ese landlord responsable. Para los neoyorquinos de esta comunidad y de toda la ciudad, you know, this is not politics as usual. Esto no es una política tradicional. Esta es una política donde estamos demostrando que se está invirtiendo donde más se necesita. Mantener la fábrica de Nueva York, el rostro de Nueva York, que sin la clase trabajadora y sin la clase media no fuéramos esa ciudad vibrante a nivel mundial. Y esta noticia que estamos recibiendo hoy es una noticia para los landlords de este vecindario y de toda la ciudad, que nosotros recibimos los buenos landlords, pero que nosotros vamos a asegurarnos que aquellos malos landlords tengan que enfrentar a la ciudad y, si es necesario, enfrentar a la justicia. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Councilmember Mark Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for launching this aggressive and incredibly needed strategy today. And thank you, Madam Public Advocate, for doing the underlying work of identifying these problem landlords. You know, for decades, we've seen landlords who, out of neglect, have failed to make repairs, even those that are critical safety measures. Sadly, we're still battling that phenomenon today, but we're seeing the emergence in recent years of an even more insidious game plan by landlords who, for whom failure to make repairs isn't just a matter of neglect, it's actually a deliberate tactic. They're using failure to make repairs as a weapon to push tenants out, with a plan to make conditions in buildings unlivable so that tenants have no choice to leave. And when they do, because of the gaping holes in our rent laws, because of vacancy decontrol, landlords are able to jack up the rent, double and triple. And unfortunately, one of the buildings on the Dirty Dozen list is in my district at 541 West 150th Street, and this is exactly what we're seeing there. And you are coming at it, we are coming at it with a 1-2 punch, both of using the money the city is putting into the pockets of these landlords appropriately as leverage, and also providing tenants an attorney to level the playing field for them in housing court, so that they have a fair fight on the legal terrain of housing court. So I want to thank you for that, Mr. Mayor and Madam Public Advocate, and of course our amazing Commissioner of YWHA, Steve Banks. Brevemente en español, quiero agradecerle al alcalde y la defensora del pueblo por lanzar hoy una estrategia tan necesitada, agresiva, en contra de algunos caseros que están rehusando hacer mantenimiento básico, inclusive cuando es cuestión de seguridad básico para los inquilinos. Estamos hoy en día diciendo ya basta, no vamos a seguir pagando los pagos de alquiler a ningún casero que rehúse de hacer mantenimiento básico. Y estamos dando además el poder de un abogado a los inquilinos de estos 12 edificios. Así que thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Madam Public Advocate, and thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you. And now our newest colleague, Councilmember Rafael Salamanca.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having this press conference, and thank you, Madam Public Advocate, for all the work that you're doing. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak here today in regards to an important issue that's affecting many residents in the South Bronx. Every day in my office, prior to being council member at the community board, and now as a council member, I've received numerous calls from constituents facing housing issues that many of us cannot even imagine, whether it's peeling paint, leaks, rodent infestation, and perhaps most shockingly, no heat or hot water for days, weeks, or even months at a time. And this is simply unacceptable. This includes residents of 750 Grand Concourse, whose landlord, actually better yet said, whose slumlord is Ved Parkash. About a month and a half ago, I stood with residents of this building in front of the Bronx Housing Court as they filed papers against their landlord, a man that the public advocate has deemed the worst landlord in the city of New York. And the number of violations this landlord has accumulated are staggering. Among 11 buildings, this individual was at one point cited for 2,369 open violations, including 500 violations in 750 Grand Concourse alone. Yes, 500. And that's why I'm here today, because first, no tenant should have to live in such ridiculous and terrible conditions, but also because taxpayers should not have to subsidize landlords who are ranking in rent payments and providing nothing back to their tenants in return. This is long overdue. It's a common sense measure that will go a long way in providing hundreds of New Yorkers with safer, cleaner, and more affordable housing. I hope that we can utilize this method to rectify many of the problems we see with landlords who are repeat offenders, and I believe that we will quickly see positive results. I'm greatly looking forward to continuing to making strides for tenants across the city of New York, and I thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and Public Advocate Letitia James, and Commissioner Banks and Dean for their leadership on this issue.
Thank you very much, Councilman. All right, we're going to take questions on the topic of today's announcement, then we'll go to off-topic. Let's see if we have questions about today's announcement first. I'll let the public advocate and then Commissioner Banks talk to you about the specific strategy here.
There was a negotiation with our office as well as with the administration, and we selected those landlords that had the most dangerous, hazardous, and violations which were detrimental to health and safety, and that's how we came to the, as was referred to, the dirty dozen.
Yeah, I should say that, as the mayor said, this is a strategy that has been dormant for many, many years, and we, HPD and HRA, identified several buildings over the past year to see whether it worked. It did work. One building, for example, had 248 violations. We brought it down to 10 without having to go to court, and then working together, HPD and HRA, with the public advocate, we've identified another group of buildings to start with, and we're going to continue to move forward with this process to correct conditions that have built up for many years.
I just want to note, a quick follow on this, that, look, I want to commend the public advocate because this, using a new approach, or de facto new, it's been dormant for decades, literally. I mean, this is a very smart play to use another tool, a different kind of approach to get at these bad landlords. When we started the worst landlords list in my time as public advocate, we worked closely with HPD. The list is generated effectively by HPD. It's based on HPD's public accounting of violations. We tried to add sort of a very public shine a spotlight element to it by bringing attention to landlords, by trying to get other pieces of the equation into play to sort of pressure them in terms of all their other dealings publicly. And that was effective in many cases, and HPD did a great job as part of that teamwork we had. I think that has deepened in the last couple of years. And every single building on that watch list is a concern to us, and we work to follow up on all of them. But as Tish said, some of them are particularly severe and particularly good examples of how to use this strategy. So to me, it's exciting that this tool is now in play, because I think it's going to really send a shudder up the spine of some of these landlords when they realize that not only are they liable for fines, not only are they liable for any fees that they have to pay because we had to make repairs. Now they could have the rent withheld, and as I said, then you could go from there. Now, because there's going to be more legal help for the tenants, it facilitates the notion that a building might even end up in receivership, or other charges may be brought against the landlord, all the way up to criminal charges. And you've seen lately, and I commend the Attorney General for this, more of these bad landlords who are trying to flip buildings in a very aggressive manner, who are harassing and evicting tenants illegally, more of them are actually facing criminal charges. And so I think a message is going out that a new set of rules, and I think the public advocate's action in this is a crucial step.
This 1962 law hasn't been used since the Johnson administration. Given that you worked in the Diggins administration, do you happen to know why they didn't?
I was asking that question this very morning. I don't. I had not known that this was a tool until this collaboration brought it to light. But I'm thrilled that it's been revived. It's certainly a time when we need it. Yeah. Yeah, so let me do that in sequential order. It's a great question. The first one, is there a potential backfire on this. I don't think so. And I'll let my colleagues speak to it. They've been much closer to it, but I'll tell you why I don't think so. Because we're working with more and more landlords on the basis of the idea that we're going to provide very consistent funding. We're going to provide faster follow-through inspections and other pieces that we have to do, so long as people are good actors. And the vast majority of landlords are. Let's face it, and I'm happy about this fact. The vast majority of landlords do follow the rules. The vast majority of landlords that we provide any kind of subsidy to do follow the rules. So I think for them, they know that we only want them to succeed. In fact, we're trying to make it easier for them to succeed. This is a pretty small minority, but a very dangerous minority of landlords that causes a lot of harm to people. So that's the first point. On the second point, as you know, we've beefed up the Human Rights Commission. And fighting discrimination based on income, which is a piece of legislation I had the honor of authoring back in my time in the City Council, is a high priority right now for the Human Rights Commission. As I said that when we talked before, the results can be fines to landlords who discriminate and providing that apartment as part of the compensation to the prospective tenant. So I know it's a high priority. I know real resources have been put into it. I don't have the exact figures. Does anyone have an update on that?
Well, a couple of things are important to remember on the source of income discrimination enforcement. When we announced the reforms after the mayor directed us to take a look at the homeless shelter system after 20 years, one of the key reforms we announced last month was adding an additional enforcement unit at HRA to augment the work of Human Rights Commission. That was just announced a couple of weeks ago. We're moving forward with it. In the meantime, the Human Rights Commission has brought cases. There was recently a case covered in the paper in which a landlord suffered the consequences of failing to accept rental assistance issued by HRA for a HASA client. So you're seeing enforcement actions proceeding, but with the mayor's support, we're augmenting the effort of the Human Rights Commission with that unit at HRA.
Yes, Josh.
Why do you expect to eventually use this law when you're announcing today against a number of landlords? Do you think it's sort of citywide, do you more, or just kind of a smaller subset?
I'll start, and my colleague, I'm sure, have a strong view on this too. Look, I think the strategic question is, does this start to add up in a favorable manner for our efforts to make sure people have decent living conditions? Meaning, you've got the original work of the landlord's watch list shining a light on these bad actors. You've got HPD's enforcement actions. Now we're bringing a new tool to bear with very tangible impact. And as I said, you've got the Attorney General out there, to his great credit, bringing prosecutions. You'd like to believe that at a certain point, all of those tools send such a clear preventative message that you will be caught and it will have an impact, that we don't have to use it too much because the problem will start to recede. But what I would say is we're in a very aggressive place right now, and it is because of the moment in New York City history. The cost of housing, the pressure in the housing market that, unfortunately for the unscrupulous landlords, has been their reason for violating the laws ever more openly. So I'd like to believe eventually a lot of enforcement turns the tide. In the short term, I think we're going to have to not only fix a lot of these buildings because that's the right thing to do, I think we're going to have to make an example of some of these bad landlords. Tish or Steve?
Let me just say this, that the vast majority of landlords in the city of New York follow the law and do the right thing. It's important to understand that. But there is a subset of landlords who unfortunately ignore the law. And I believe this action here today will have a chilling effect on those landlords who have ignored violations, who have ignored calls to their offices, and to their management offices. And I think as a result of the action here today, more landlords who are on the worst landlord list will be contacting the Office of Public Advocate and urging a discussion, negotiation with regards to settling their violations and continue and improve the conditions for those individuals who unfortunately have these serious violations confronting them. Source of income discrimination is an issue that we have been dealing with the Human Rights Commission. I'm so glad that the mayor has beefed up the Office of Human Rights, and so we have been bringing some complaints to their attention. And lastly, let me just say that a significant number of landlords who were on the worst landlord list have contacted our office and want to be responsible and want to resolve the complaints that have been alleged and that have been filed against them. And so it's a process that is ongoing, and I look forward again to working with the administration on a wide range of issues. And I also want to give a shout out to the District Attorney of Brooklyn and Manhattan, who we have worked with, who, as you know, there were arrests in both of those boroughs of 2 slum landlords.
And just finishing that point, the public advocate is making a powerful point. People who want to get right with the law have a chance to come in and do it before more and more of these penalties and consequences add up. And certainly we saw this in my time as public advocate too. Some people, some landlords do come in and say, okay, what's it going to take to get off this list? And we welcome that. We said, great, if you're going to do the right thing, we're going to acknowledge that you came off the list. Well, here's an example where the penalties are going to go up substantially. It's going to give them more incentive to come in and get right. There's a state law change needed for sure, and this is something back when I was public advocate we recognized the penalties should keep increasing. Now, I don't think that's likely to happen this year in Albany, but I think in the coming years there's a chance to get that done. The penalties should be more severe and should take effect much more quickly. Do you want to add?
No, I agree. Working Albany, given the Republicans who lead the New York State Senate continue to raise objections to any change in the law. And so we are continuing to have conversations with them along with the administration, and hopefully they will change the law and recognize that their priority should be protecting the life and safety of individuals who are living in substandard housing in the city of New York. I urge you to reach out to them.
I don't think there is much basis. So that's an interesting topic stretch, but I'll work with you on that one. On the first question, we had some great examples. And I don't know the chapter and verse of the last 2 years plus, but in my time we had some examples where people really did not like the negative attention and the persistence of the attention, and or honestly were trying to deal with very problematic conditions. Some, for example, had bought buildings with the intention of fixing them, meaning they didn't create the problems. They bought them with the intention of upgrading them, and in some cases for affordable housing programs. Others had just plain been violating the law and wanted to get out of it while they could and fix the problem. Or some, we wanted them to stop being the owner because they were such bad landlords we didn't expect any change, so all we wanted to do was force an ownership change. So we had all of those situations. Good landlords who bought a bad building and were willing to quickly work with us to fix it. Not so great landlords who were willing to get right with the law, and that got done. And landlords who were hopeless, but were willing to get the hell out of the way and change ownership. We had all those scenarios, and I think, again, in this atmosphere, with more and more scrutiny, more and more tools for enforcement, I would expect you to see more of that.
So on any given day, there's a line of tenants who line up to see some of our caseworkers and social workers in the Office of Public Advocate. As soon as we publish the worst landlords list, the very next day there's a line of landlords who want to come in and negotiate with Jennifer Levy and her team. They basically want to get off this list. And so we continue to negotiate with any landlords, and again, to the media that's out there, let any landlords know who believe that they should not be on the list, or who believe that they want, or who want to basically correct the violations that have been filed. They should contact our office. We have an open door policy. They can come in on any given day and we can resolve the issue right then and there. I do not believe that this administration wants to be in the business as happened in the 1970s and 80s, where a lot of property in the city of New York became in rem property and they became a landlord. I believe what we want to do is make sure landlords follow the law in the city of New York and make sure that tenants are living in safe conditions consistent with the laws on the books.
I'll come to your other question when we start the off topic. Just while we're on this, want to keep consistent with this. In terms of how much rent would be withheld, it's certainly in the tens of thousands to begin. Do we have a more precise figure?
The monthly amount of public assistance rental payments that we have the ability to withhold if the landlords do not respond is $30,000 a month approximately.
$30,000 for these 12 buildings, right?
Yes.
Per month, $30,000 per month, so $250,000 over the course of, no, more than that, over the course of a year, $130,000 over the course of a year. The total. But again, I think that still is going to register on top of the other things we're talking about, because I mentioned the $100,000 in fees and fines already assessed on the buildings. That's totally separate from rent being withheld.
Is this a tactic that other folks who are not public assistants should use if they have some problem in their building? Maybe tenants get together, withhold rent, put it in an escrow account?
It's a good question, but what I'd say is work with our lawyers, or if they have their own lawyers, that's something lawyers should determine, because Tish and Steve are more experts on this. It is a tactic that should be used carefully, but we've made very clear if there's a legal harassment or illegal eviction, we will provide a lawyer for free. I think the smart thing to do is for the tenants to let the lawyer determine the sequencing so the tenants don't end up disadvantaging themselves.
I think it's also important to remember for anyone who's hearing about this announcement that the 1962 law provides a complete defense to an eviction proceeding for somebody who's a tenant whose public assistance rent was withheld. And the circumstances of people who are not on public assistance will be different. But what's important here is that this is a tool that will benefit all tenants in the building, irrespective of whether they're on public assistance or not.
And just finally, I'd just like to ask our colleagues in the media, please remind New Yorkers as part of your coverage that anyone who believes they're being illegally harassed or evicted by their landlord can call 311 and can be connected to a city lawyer. That's something we want to keep reminding people of. On this topic, last call on this topic, going once, twice. Okay, your question. Well, why don't you start with the first one, then we'll go to the second one. So let's do the first one. I'll come to it. We've announced very clearly our plan. Both HRA and DHS will be under the leadership of the Commissioner for Social Services. That's a designation Steve Banks already had under state law. It is not a merger. A merger would mean you create one agency. We're talking about two agencies that will have a number of back office functions integrated for efficiency and savings. But the leadership structures, both agencies will respond to Commissioner for Social Services, but they will remain distinct agencies. And that's the result of that 90-day review. And we are going to work with that plan for the foreseeable future.
The second question concerns the shooting last night involving Compton's rapper T.I. First, is there not any investigation? How did someone get into this place with a gun? And second, the Commissioner of the Police Department said that he blamed the rap world, in his words, for the shooting. Do you agree with the culture of the rap world is violence?
First of all, Chief Boyce is giving an update to the media right now on the shooting, so that's going to be the most up-to-date information. Obviously, investigation underway. I haven't seen the Commissioner's comments. I think this is an individual instance. That would be my answer. This is an individual instance. I think it's hard to generalize. Okay, other questions? Yes.
Mayor, on the Metro North fire, I know your administration announced today that FDNY will be making monthly inspections of the Urban Garden Center. The owner there says that he's being scapegoated and that it's not like they didn't have a lease arrangement and that EDC hadn't really been paying attention to them. Did you have any words for the folks at EDC or any other city agency about whether the ball had been dropped or something had fallen through the cracks over the years?
I find the owner's comments surprising. There were clearly violations. He should own up to it. And he should get right with the law. And he should continue to do his work the way he's supposed to. That site, which is part of the La Marqueta complex, is a very important site in East Harlem, very important to the community. We obviously believe it's a site that can continue to contribute if all the laws are followed. And safety is the #1 priority. So there will be additional scrutiny. And we're only in any situation where we provide an opportunity for someone to be our tenant only if they are following our laws. If not, they're not going to be there.
Shouldn't city agencies be checking up to make sure people are following those laws?
That's obviously what we do on a regular basis across the entire government, right? I mean, things we're talking about today and so many other things. We have laws, we inform people of laws, and we check on them regularly. The responsibility of every business owner is to do what the law says, particularly when it comes to health and safety. So, you know, I would say to the owner, just own up to the fact you did something wrong, get right, and we can move forward. If you're not going to get right, it's not going to work. Yeah.
Can you put public advocate transparency is one of the issues you emphasize? So a couple of questions on that. You've referred to direction you received from Boy campaign for New York. Could you share with us direction you received from them on PPAC, United for Affordable New York, and your fundraising?
Some of that, as you know, has already been made public, and with legal guidance, anything that can be made public, of course, we will. Grace?
Mayor, a statement that your office put out yesterday emphasized that one of your outside advisors, Patrick Gaspar, doesn't represent any clients that have business before the city, but for a
long time, and advice I have sought, and we've handled it appropriately, but they do not speak to me about their clients.
Doesn't that give them and their businesses a significant leg up in terms of bringing new clients in, their special way?
I don't know how they run their businesses. When it comes to me, they're not talking to me about their clients.
Did you speak to them in advance at all about their role as an agent of the city or an outside advisor?
Again, they're advisors. They had been advisors before. I think we've handled things appropriately.
Last week, you told us that you would be releasing a list soon of all of the donors to the campaign for One Did you get something from the administration?
There's going to be, as I said last week, a series of occasions when we'll release information of various kinds. And that's going to happen when each one is ready. But I look forward to sharing a lot of information in the coming weeks.
So, ballpark time frame?
No, when we're ready. I mean, I don't want to say a time frame I'm not ready to stick by, but you will see in the coming weeks more and more information coming out of a variety of topics that I think will be very helpful. Marcia. It's true, there's lots of people who donated have not gotten what to improve the lives of the people.
What have you been doing? How have you been involved in those conversations? Are you concerned at all about what this is going to mean for PPAC without you?
Absolutely. We have had a series of conversations with Mount Sinai, the parent entity, made very clear that there is an approval process related to their proposal, and we are going to play an active role in that process, and we will judge when we see the entire plan what stance to take. I am pleased to say the initial proposal, I emphasize the word initial, involves emergency facilities for the community and other key areas that we care about deeply, including mental health and substance abuse services. There are not layoffs of union employees. That's important. But the jury is still out. So the initial proposal did answer some of the crucial concerns that we've seen in each of these situations that wasn't true bluntly in the past. Some of these other closures have been just one and done. You know, the proposal was the whole thing would shut down, no effort to protect workers, no effort to provide community services. So this is better than some of what we've seen in the past, but there's going to be a very, very thorough process here, and we'll reserve judgment until we've gone through that process. Let's say it this way. There is, my understanding of the proposal, and I'm looking forward to a fuller briefing, there's more than one element to it, and some of the elements would require city approval. So we're going to exercise our rights in that process. But I'm emphasizing this has just begun. We're just beginning to get a picture of what the proposal is, and we'll certainly play a major role and have a lot more to say as this goes along. Dave?
Mayor, can I just back up just for a second to last night's shooting?
Yes.
Mayor, first, I know that you said that you haven't heard what Commissioner Bracken said, but just you personally, do you feel that the rap world, if you will, fosters violence?
I would say it differently. I think rap, like any other genre, is very, very diverse. I am relatively current because of the musical choices of Dante and Chiara. So I hear a lot, and some is thoughtful and socially conscious, and some I find distasteful. But I could say that about a lot of genres. I could say that about popular culture in general. I could say that about, popular movies. I think our culture glorifies violence. I think that's an American problem. And beyond all of the issues of law, which we have to change, obviously the laws around gun safety in particular, come on, this is not a state secret. Huge amount of money is made in this country glorifying violence and using violence as a way to sell music, TV, movies, etc. So I think it's a much bigger problem than just rap, and I don't think you can generalize about rap.
Mayor, two questions. One about the young man that died at Nagle Ave yesterday. Was the city aware that there may be a potential cutting of the cookie yesterday? And did you guys take any particular steps to try to make sure people were...
Look, we have for years and years tried to warn young people, and even more importantly their parents, that swimming when there are not lifeguards is very dangerous, and that you should not swim in a beach that's not open and doesn't have a lifeguard. We've said it over and over. We're going to say it in a lot more ways. I've instructed both the Parks Department and Department of Education to amplify that message. And Parks Department will have extra presence out this weekend, even in the even preceding the formal opening of the beaches, to help prevent anyone from trying. But I have to say, my heart goes out. I mean, obviously, I'm the father of a teenager myself, and it's a horrible tragedy for this family. But we need everyone in this city to get the message across, particularly to our young people, no matter how hot it is. It's just not safe to go on a beach that there's no lifeguard.
One question. There was a donation made to the campaign from New York for $20,000, and that donation did not show up on your voluntary disclosures or your 2014 J-Code disclosures.
Yeah, I don't know if that, I have to check. There are cases where donations were returned, so I have to check on that one. Yeah.
This is about the earthquake in Ecuador. I know that Ecuadorians are one of the biggest immigrant communities here in the city. The government has asked for temporary protected status for family members who are affected by the earthquake. A lot of lawmakers are pushing the president to approve that. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that fast track?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Ecuadorian community is a very big part of New York City and growing. And look, after the Haiti earthquake, which was absolutely horrendous and had a horrible impact on the people of that country, but also affected so many families here, we really pushed hard, all of us in New York City, to get that status for Haitians who were here. And I think it's appropriate to apply again. The amount of dislocation that happens in people's lives in this kind of tragedy is overwhelming. And, we're so closely linked to Ecuador now. It's important to give people a chance to get back on their feet. You follow up and then you're behind it. Go ahead.
This is about Puerto Rico. They're having this huge death crisis.
Yes.
Do you think that Congress should take action?
There's no question. I've been very blunt about the fact, you talk about a tale of two cities. If this crisis were occurring in one of the 50 states, Congress would have acted already. And the reason they have not acted is all about race and all about the fact that Puerto Rico is being treated as a second-class part of the United States, and it's absolutely unfair. There's over 3 million of our fellow Americans who are in great danger right now. Their government institutions are falling apart because of the debt crisis. Their healthcare system's falling apart. They're hemorrhaging doctors, and they have the Zika crisis hitting simultaneously. This should be a national security matter. That's how it should be seen. Look, I wish I didn't have to make the parallel to Katrina, but it's a pretty obvious one. You know, again, a situation where a massive tragedy occurred primarily to people of color, and the United States of America didn't respond. So. It's comparable on the level of the lack of response in the face of an obvious problem, and that there are underlying obvious reasons that are unacceptable and immoral. But practically, the difference here is, while Katrina was obviously a natural disaster with man-made elements that had an immediate horrible impact, this is a long, slow disaster. The health care of thousands and thousands of people is being compromised right this moment. And we know how horrible Zika is and what it can do to children, but it's also, you know, the more research is being done, the more concerned about what it can do to adults as well. And so at that very moment, our federal government is standing apart from Puerto Rico instead of urgently fixing their situation and getting them back on their feet. So it's unacceptable. Last question, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, on your outside advisors, doesn't the public, even separate from business they might have in the city with their clients, just on advising you, doesn't the public have the right to some insights into what those conversations are like, even if you were to redact some of them because of implications of the discussions? Shouldn't the public be able to see, for example, if you were considering something for the BQX in a different location and they were advising on that, shouldn't that be available to the public?
I understand the question, but I believe that their role as advisors was appropriate, and the way it's being handled based on legal guidance is appropriate. Again, if it's something involving a client, I've said very clearly I'm not going to talk to them about their clients, and if they were talking to anyone about their clients, that's an entirely different matter. But in terms of general advice, everyone in the history of public life has had a kitchen cabinet, and we looked at this from the beginning, sought the appropriate legal guidance, we're following that guidance, so I think it is appropriate.
No communication with them whatsoever on advising you is going to be turned over. Isn't that a little...
I think we're handling it appropriately. That's the bottom line answer.
Part of that is 4 of those 5 have made quite a bit of money through the campaign for One New York from people with business before the city, unions, developers, etc. A lot of money has funneled through the campaign for One New York to those top advisors. Are New Yorkers not supposed to see that as problematic, that money was asked to be donated to the campaign for One New York and winds up going to the people in fees that are advising you on the side?
I think it's absolutely appropriate. The work they did was to achieve pre-K for all our children, was to achieve an affordable housing program that will reach 500,000 people. I don't know what's more appropriate than that. Those are priorities of the administration. The entire viewpoint we come at this with is we had a set of priorities. We had to find a way to achieve them on behalf of all New Yorkers. This was the appropriate way to do it. I think it was done right. Thanks, everyone. I gave you 3, my friend. Thanks a lot.